Madhava. Ravana Chadi Ravana Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajanarajana Jana Brajajanarajana Yashodanandana Brajajanarajana Jana Brajajanarajana Yamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamati Ravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Madhava Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajivacharya Astata Satasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.Z. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nice to be back with y'all. And compliments to our technology team, because the same thing that they're doing here, They tried and tried and tried in Austin, and they couldn't do it. So we switched to something simpler, but the technology team here is tops. So compliments to the technology team and the master himself. The topic for the morning classes will be Uddhava Gita. And because this is the first class here in Houston, I'll do a little summary, background summary, the little, the backdrop behind the deity, right? So this is the backdrop. Krishna's pastimes are about to conclude. Chapter 6, this is chapter 9. Chapter 6, we're in Dwarka. Samba and his friends, they made a big boo-boo. They offended the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas cursed not only the boys, but the Brahmanas cursed the whole Yadu dynasty. That lump of iron that's in the abdomen area of Samba will bring the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. The boys were really sorry. The boys went to Ugrasena. They informed Ugrasena what happened. Ugrasena decided to have that lump of iron ground into powder and thrown into the sea. Well, as we know, the powder that was thrown into the sea, washed up on the shore, formed reeds that were iron-like, which brought about the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. And then there was a piece that wouldn't grind no matter what, that was thrown in as fish swallowed the lump of iron that wouldn't grind. A fisherman caught the fish. A hunter bought the fish. When he opened the fish, he found a lump of iron. He used that lump of iron to make an arrowhead, which was the arrowhead that pierced the heel of Krishna, that was the pastime of Krishna's departure. Okay, so, but that's going forward in time. Going back in time, the curse was made, and the demigods, chapter 6, the demigods visited Krishna in Dwarka. Invisible to other people, but Krishna could see, and they offered prayers. And then they said, "You fulfilled your promise. The demons have been killed. If you so desire, you can return to the spiritual world." And they departed. Krishna is alone. Krishna contemplated. The stage is set for my departure, for the Yadu's departure, except one person. I want to leave behind Uddhava, and I want to give teachings to Uddhava, so that two things: Uddhava can take my teachings to the sages at Badrik Ashram, the associates of Narayan Rishi, and the second is he can then travel about the earth and give those teachings in my absence. Something like what Ram did with Hanuman, something like that. So, the end of chapter 6, as we see, whoops, we don't see on the screen. Now we see on the screen. Uddhava came to Krishna in Dwarka, and he threw himself at Krishna's feet, knowing his Lord and Master as he knows him. "You're going to depart, please take me with you. Don't leave me behind." And of course, Krishna left him behind. And the second was that sets the stage for what we're discussing, the next 3 chapters, 7, 8, and 9. I'm an attached householder, and because of my attachments to the temporary, I cannot understand you properly. Please help me understand how I can become free from attachment. Fits everybody, right? So chapter 7 begins, Krishna gives some general instructions on knowledge and detachment. Uddhava says, yeah, but not easy to become detached. So then Krishna says, here I'm going to give you some teachings that will help. So this whole section is Jnana Vairagya, which is standard in all of the Vedic wisdom. Jnana Vairagya is a couplet that goes everywhere. That leads to bhakti, or knowing Krishna. So he decides to tell him a story of one of their ancestors, King Yadu, because Krishna's in the Yadu Vamsa. Pay attention over here. Krishna's in the Yadu Vamsa, right? Yes? Yadu Vamsa, the line of King Yadu. So King Yadu, our ancestor, one time was passing through his capital, and he saw an Avaduta Brahmin. You know the meaning, Avaduta? Avaduta? Just like a social disregard of anything, social norms. Avaduta, Brahmin. And King Yadu saw, a young man, very handsome and sensually strong, no deformities or anything like so. You're this and you're that, and you're this and you're that, but you're so detached. How did this happen? What was the means by which you became so elevated? And the Avaduta Brahmin says, I learned knowledge and detachment from 24 gurus. And it's explained, it's important in this whole narration. It's explained that he didn't have a formal Shiksha guru. It's not that any one of these 24 gurus explained things, rather they were realizations. Because realization is an important source of knowledge. One of the 10 the Jiva Goswami describes, and that our sampradaya rests upon as well, one of very important source. So these 24, he then, the Avaduta Brahmana is explaining to Yadu, King Yadu, these gurus, and the gurus include earth, mountains, trees, sun, wind, water, birds, fish. He learned knowledge and detachment from these various entities. So there's 2 chapters, are now in the 3rd chapter, 9. And he just finished, chapter 8, the big section is a prostitute. It's one of his gurus, because she's the only one so far of the list of gurus that actually became devotees. The others were like a detached fish, or, he learned detachment from the fish, etc. So the prostitute's name was Pingala, and this long section, and she got the position that she got by some association. You don't get bhakti without association with bhaktas. So it's a long narration, which is not meant for this morning, because this is just a summary. But somehow the acharyas, some authorities say this and that. And one of the options that the authorities say is she was in Videha, Mithila, and she had association with some of the sages in Mithila. So some say it was that association that enabled her to switch over from being a prostitute to a detached person to a Shuddha Bhakta. She submits herself fully to the personality of Godhead in a stage of Raganuga Bhakti. And then we had with some of our learned devotees have had some discussions. Can you practice Raganuga Bhakti outside of following the Ragatmika perfected souls, eternal associates of Krishna in Vrindavan? Well, Pingala did. So that's a whole discussion. So that chapter ends. Then this chapter 9 begins, and the guru that he spoke about first was a young girl. Well, not second was a young girl that had many bangles on her wrist, and some suitors that wished to marry her came to visit their home, and her mom and dad were away, and she went to the kitchen to serve them, to prepare a meal. She was husking rice paddy. As she was doing that, her bangles were making a big clamor, and so she removed all but two, and then the two were making noise, so she removed the final, so just one on each wrist. And there's a whole discussion about he learned from her bangles, the importance of living a solitary life. If you're a Gyani, you live a solitary life. And if you're a devotee, you associate with devotees, and that's the same. There's nice discussion. Lots of, 5, 6 verses on that one. Now this one, where we're picking up is a person who makes arrows. And he learned from the person who makes arrows. And he speaks about, the Avadhuta Brahman speaks about a yogi who is so concentrated on Supersoul that other things just, there may be some awareness of other things, there may not be awareness of other things, but their attention doesn't move. The yogi's attention doesn't move from Paramatma, Samadhi. And so similarly, although he wasn't a yogi, there's an arrow maker that was so absorbed in making a nice arrow and an arrowhead that when the king was passing, he didn't even notice the king was passing because he was so fixed on making a nice arrowhead for his nice arrow. Here's the image. There's the arrow maker. This is the last verse in this section. By the way, the artist is none other than one of your residents here in Houston, Shruti Mangara. And she's really good with what she does, including this image is from her as well. So the background, and she's pretty good at this. So I'm going to now begin reading verse 13, which is the third and final verse on the arrow maker, what he learned from the arrow maker. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote extensive commentary on the entire section of Uddhava Gita, which is almost as long as Bhagavad Gita. Very elaborate commentary. So you'll hear his commentary as well. It's now translated and available in a published form. Text 13, Canto 11, Chapter 9. Thus, when one's consciousness is completely fixed in the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one no longer sees duality or internal and external reality. The example is given of the arrow maker who is so absorbed in making a straight arrow that he did not even see or notice the king himself who was passing right next to him. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta's translation is slightly different. There was once an arrow maker who was so absorbed in making a straight arrow that he did not even notice the king when he passed right in front of him. When one's consciousness is completely fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one no longer sees in terms of duality or internal and external reality. Here's the BBT purport means this is Prabhupada's disciples. And I can tell you from the language, Sri Dayananda Maharaj's thumbprints are all over the place here, the way that he expresses himself. Dravida told me that much of the work that was done on the Bhaktivedanta purports by his disciples was Gopi's work. And Sri Dayananda Maharaj looked over it or something like that. But this is, he's got his type of language very, very clearly. It is understood, purport, it is understood that when a king moves on a public street, he is heralded by kettle drums and other musical instruments and is accompanied by soldiers and other members of his retinue. Thus, despite this royal extravaganza passing right by his workshop, the arrow maker did not even notice because he was completely absorbed in his prescribed duty of making an arrow straight and sharp. One who is completely absorbed in loving devotional service to the absolute truth, Sri Krishna, no longer pays attention to material illusion. In this verse, the word bahis, or external, refers to the innumerable objects of material sense gratification, such as food, drink, sex, and so on, which drag the senses of the conditioned soul into material duality. The word antaram, or internal, refers to memory of previous sense gratification or hopes and dreams for future materialistic situations. That's the internal and external reality. Neither of it is reality. One who is seeing everywhere the absolute truth, Sri Krishna categorically rejects both internal and external illusion. This is called mukti pada. Mukti pade sadayavak, mukti pada. Or the status of liberation. On this platform, there is neither attraction nor aversion to sense objects, semicolon. Rather, there is loving absorption in the absolute truth, Krishna, and an overwhelming desire to please him by devotional service. One who gives up the reality of Krishna will be forced to wander uselessly in the kingdom of mental speculation. One who cannot see that the absolute truth, Lord Krishna, is the background and basis for everything that exists will be bewildered by the false concept that there is something that is not Krishna. Everything emanates from the Lord, and he is the Lord of everything. This simple understanding is the actual existential situation. Now here is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's purport. The only way to withdraw the mind from the objects of the senses is to eagerly engage in devotional service of the Lord, of Lord Krishna. When the mind is not absorbed in fervently desiring to please the Supreme Lord, it wanders on the subtle platform of accepting and rejecting the things of this world. It's like chanting japa, right? Distracted japa. By surrendering unto the Supreme Lord and engaging in his devotional service, one can be freed from the continuous struggle for supremacy of the three modes of material nature. For one who is thus fully engaged, the spirit of enjoying things in a mood of being separate from Krishna will not affect him. As long as a conditioned soul wanders within the kingdom of mental speculation, having given up Krishna's service, he will remain fully absorbed in matter. In this regard, we should carefully consider this verse of Upadeshamrita. Atyahara Paryasasya Prachalpo Niyamagraha Janasangas Chalomam Cha Shadbir Bhakti Vinashati. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. 2. Over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. 3. Talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. 4. Practicing scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. Or rejecting the rules and regulations of scriptures and working independently or whimsically. 5. Associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. 6. Being greedy for mundane achievements. Sounds like Prabhupada's words. Now, something that Bhaktisiddhanta did in his commentary is he made a gloss, or his own way of describing what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in his commentary on this verse. So here's Bhaktisiddhanta's summary, or gloss. If one desires to concentrate his mind on the Supreme Lord, he should study the example of the arrow maker. The arrow maker was so absorbed in his work that even when the king passed by with so much pomp and commotion, the arrow maker did not even notice him. And Vishwanath's commentary is very short. Atmani means the Supreme Lord. Because of complete concentration, katatma, to make the arrow straight, he did not notice the king walking nearby with the uproar of drums. Now, because I spent some time doing some hanging the backdrop here, I think I should summarize before just opening up the floor for discussion. We won't cover verse 14. In the previous 2 verses on the arrow maker, it didn't even mention arrow maker. It was mentioning a yogi. And the yogi, the description goes, was tolerating the modes of ignorance and passion so that the mind of the yogi could become fixed in the process of meditation on the Supreme Lord. And gradually, and it's a similar message, these are lessons from worldly things, but similar message from the girl with the bangles, that the modes of ignorance and passion pull the mind this way, that way, pull and push. And because it's right in the commentary, the distracted mind is not on the object of meditation. The distracted mind is, in his case, it's an arrow maker, but in our case, it's, chanting or worshiping or hearing or whatever. And thoughts go to objects, and thoughts go to time, past and future. And mode of goodness is being able to not go to contemplating objects, past and future, but the process of worship itself, or the process of hearing itself, or the process of prayer itself, or the process of deity worship itself, or absorption in the object as you're performing the activity. So it's all the senses centering. This is the yogi, controlling the mind and senses. And so he was speaking about the yogi and also the girl with the bangles as ways that he has understood how to overcome the modes of material nature and be fixed in transcendence, with the purpose here in this case, the purpose of becoming fixed in the personality of Godhead. We'll say it negatively again. As long as the modes are operating, as long as the modes are not quiet and they're operating, then real yoga, or fixing the mind on the object of worship in our case, or the object of meditation in the yogi's case, isn't going to happen. The modes of nature are very powerful, and they've got everybody under control. They're really good. And they're agents of, or the instruments of, Maya. So the operative principle, it's a really nice sentence, I'll read it again. They're required to come to the stage where the mind isn't flickering. So is the modes of nature are subsided. Now, how to get the modes of nature subsided? It takes a very, we'll use the word sankalpa. It takes a very clear intention. Not only a clear intention, but intense or strong. Here's the purport of Bhakti Siddhanta. The only way to withdraw the mind from the object of the senses is to eagerly engage in devotional service of Lord Krishna. Negative. When the mind is not absorbed in fervently desiring to please the Supreme Lord, it wanders on the subtle platform of accepting and rejecting the things of this world. Very clear, right? Let me read it one more time. The only way to withdraw the mind from the objects of the senses is to eagerly engage in devotional service of Lord Krishna. That means bhakti. The operative term, the Swarup Lakshana of Rupa Goswami's definition of bhakti is pleasing Krishna, anukulyena. Krishna, anushilana. The commentary explains that's the primary characteristic, the others are secondary, and that's what Bhakti Siddhanta is saying without making that specific detailed reference. Shri Shri Radha Nilamadava ki jai. So one adjective here is eagerly. It's actually an adverb. Eagerly engage in devotional service. The next sentence, when the mind is not absorbed in fervently desiring to please the Supreme Lord, that's, you can say the mind, but what's driving the mind is the intelligence, and what's driving the intelligence is the intention, or at the heart level, really, really strongly desiring. So negatively, if you're not really, really strongly desiring, where's the mind going to go? Guaranteed. And if one is eagerly desiring, still the mind is going to have a tendency to go. Not like presto, it's job done. But the natural inclination of fervently desiring to please the Supreme Lord checks that tendency, the conditioned tendency for wandering. That's our bhakti yoga practice. Certainly very, very obvious when we're chanting, but it's also in all the other forms of service. Without giving anecdotal examples, one can be doing some service in the kitchen, or making garlands, or dressing the deity, or something, and the mind can be all over the place. And sometimes it's a good place, sometimes it's not a good place. Sometimes it's remembering something, sometimes it's anticipating something, and it's not absorbed in the devotion of what you're engaged in. The power to dissolve that tendency is in the bhakti power. And so that's what's in these three verses. The arrow maker is the example that's being illustrated by the Avadhuta Brahmin. So he's learning from the Avadhuta Brahmin how to be absorbed in the personality of Godhead, so much so that whatever's going on in the realm of senses and sense objects, It doesn't distract you. Now, one may notice or not notice. It's not like you're better if you don't notice, and it's lesser if you notice. But the mind doesn't become distracted from purpose. Let's just say, you're driving a car. You got to notice what's going on the road. And that's a service. It's not be oblivious to what's going on in the road. But if you're the challenge is that for Krishna purpose, and it's not easy to have that for Krishna purpose in such things that we do all the time, every day, etc. But it's a cultivation. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. So that principle that Rupa Goswami is teaching is derived from the Bhagavatam, and here is Krishna's teaching. Who can be a better authority than Krishna? But Krishna is referring to King Yadu, and he's teaching teachings that Rupa Goswami has drawn from and established in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to teach us Lord Chaitanya's teachings, which are the same as the Bhagavatam's teachings. So we have lots of resources to draw from. And still we're complacent. That's the sad part. That's a whole topic. Let's see if there's some discussion. It's now 17 after the hour. I'm the only one in the room that doesn't have to wear a mask. You all have to wear masks. Unless you ask a question, then you have to point. You want to ask a question? So I can hear you better. Then.
On the topic of kind of moving past the modes, they're causing unsteady. On the topic of moving past the modes, causing
Can you fix the volume? I can't hear him so well. Go ahead, speak.
Yeah, so on the topic, like moving past the modes, kind of coming to a more steady platform, I notice oftentimes in my japa, there will be days that are very attentive and focused, but that'll last maybe 2 days, and then gradually it seems like it fades further and further into very distracted japa. How can some practical steps maybe of maintaining that steady or fixed?
Abhyasa yoga yuktena. That's a simple answer. Then what your abhyasa consists of may change from time to time. Something may inspire you, and then another point in time may inspire you, and combinations of things may inspire you. So you take shelter of those things that inspire you. But I like very much Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's answer to your question, which is the main ingredient is your effort to do so, to maintain that a better standard is your effort. And behind effort, there's intention behind effort. There's attention is driven by intention. And where attention goes, that's where your mind is going to go. The intention, sankalpa. So it continually, it's not just a tool. Tools are useful if there's a purpose behind the use of the tool. Tools are useful. And so sometimes we like this tool or that tool or combination. But the real force is, say, a yearning. Same as these words here, fervent striving. And when you're fervently striving, there's the unsteady bhakti stage. The sine curve, it goes up and then it goes down. And Bhattahari calls it the hills and the valleys. So that's the unsteady. And you just accept it, that that's where I am. And I want to go to, further beyond the unsteady to steady. So that's your question, how to become steady. Effort. Abhyasa yoga. And which effort? Well, that which inspires you, that which really helps your heart move and moves you towards a steadiness of desiring steadiness. When there's complacency in desiring steadiness or desiring connection with Krishna, look out. I'm thinking of a lecture I heard Srila Prabhupada speak in the Henry Street Temple a few years ago, maybe 45 years ago. Prabhupada was saying, when you turn your attention away from Krishna, when there's complacency, it's turning your attention away from Krishna. Immediately Maya is there. It's not that you have to call, okay, Maya, I'm going to take a little break from Krishna Bhakti. You can come now. Immediately Maya is there, engaging in distractions, anything but Krishna, just by turning attention away. So attention is essential. Where is your attention going? And intention is driving attention. So it's circling back to Sankalpa. Beware of indifference. There's a whole it's a whole topic in itself. Indifference means it's a neutral space. It's not dvesha, it's indifference. And when there's indifference, it's a setup. So when you slacken submission, it's a setup. So how to maintain continuous submission of intention. That's bhakti. It's there, it's already there. It's not something cosmetic you put on and take off. It's there, it's just awakening. And that's our life. And how well you do with your japa is how well your life is going to go. In all aspects. Social, educational, career, whatever. Something else?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Thank you for a wonderful class there. On the intention part, related to chanting, intention.
Yeah, it's a little muffled because of your mask. Thank you.
Yeah. Related to the intention while chanting, now I noticed that within the intention, if the prayerful mood is not there, then even with the intensity, the mind can take us out. So is constant prayerful mood a default necessity here, or this is because we are not trained to pray a deeper way? I'm saying in a certain, we read a lot of prayers. So.
Let me restate your question. Is our effort alone sufficient, or do we need mercy? We need both. And you slacken in the effort part. We just read what happens. Now, mercy is already there, but what is our eagerness for that mercy? We'll say it differently and respond to your question differently. Every one of us that has made a sincere attempt to remain attentive to Krishna finds out you can't do it alone. Now, if you don't make that sincere effort, you won't find out, because you'll still think I can do it alone. But if you really make a sincere effort, you find out you can't do it alone. So the answer to your question is, yes, there's different ways of saying prayerful mood, but the essence is mercy, calling out for mercy. Anyone else? If we don't have anything else, is there something online? Here comes the online meeting.
There's one question
Go ahead.
from Lubit Giridhar.
Mask, please, just so I can hear you better.
From Lubit Giridhar. Leela Smaran Prabhu.
Okay.
Attention to Krishna is driven by intention. How do we fix one's intention to overcome complacency?
How to overcome complacency.
Yes.
Ask him, he knows. It was the same question that he was asking in different language. Complacency is just slackening in submission. And when we're slackening in submission, we go to a place that, who likes to suffer? But part of the problem, a big part of the problem, is people don't even know that they're suffering. They don't even know what happiness and suffering are. So a very helpful tool or principle is sadhu sangha. Stay in association of those who are not complacent, and it'll help you become free from complacency. That's it? Anything else in the room? Srila Prabhupada ki jai.